This video is brought to you by Roma Caput Mundi, Rome, capital of the world t-shirt, the new line available on Teespring on the Metatron's shop. Link in the description below. Support the empire, support the channel. Vikings versus Legionaries. Metatron, what are you on about? Well, come on, we are history buffs, we are nerds, so shut up. So if we had a duel between a Viking and a Legionary, what would happen? How easily would one defeat the other? Would it be an even match? Would one of the two parties have a huge advantage? Well, here's the thing. Before we can talk about this, we need to talk about what a Viking is. And no, shh. I know, you know, right, but he doesn't. The Vikings are hugely misunderstood. There is a lot of misconceptions on the Vikings. First off, a Viking is a raider, yes, and a trader, although not many people know this. So of course we are considering the raider, because if you take a merchant and you put him in a duel of Mortal Kombat versus a legionary, then yes, that would be the end of the video. But those also existed. It's this idea of all Vikings being violent, piratical heathens, bloodthirsty combat warriors, then they're all killing people for no reason, so just to steal their money. Yeah, but not all of them were like this, okay? But unfortunately, this concept, this idea of the Vikings based on this cliche, on this stereotypical image, has been with us until the end of the 19th century. It's been only recently that the other aspects of the Viking, for example, their technological skill, their artistry, their seamanship, have been considered, reaching actually the other side of the scale, considering that now with the new TV series, or new sort of a few years now, but with the TV series on the Vikings, of course now they have become intrepid adventurers. Vikings were Norse seafarers. Full stop. This is what a Viking is. Many of them raided, in fact, for example, monastery Lindensfarne is the most famous one. Some also traded. So let's set aside those Vikings who were disseminating their culture. I don't think you would want to disseminate a Roman legionary while he's trying to stab you with his gladius. Let's consider one of those Viking raiders, plunderers. And let's say that as he was plundering one of those monasteries and he's taking the monks, he has slain a few, but he has kept 3 or 4 that he can sell, for example, to the Arabs for silver. But as he goes out with his servants, at his slaves on leash, there he sees him, the Roman legionary. So what the heck is a Roman legionary doing there in the 8th century? It's okay, it's just for the purposes of this video. But he's there, he was catapulted through a time machine, he sees the Viking and he's like, whoa, a barbarian, let's kill him! The Viking leaves the leash and takes his weapon. What would that be? So talking about gear, which is a very important thing, and so what kind of equipment were these these enemies in this case using? Well, of course, the Roman legionary, I believe, would have an advantage as far as the sort of equipment is concerned. Not because, regardless of the fact that there is a gap of centuries. The Viking is a man of the future, and yet I would give an advantage to the legionary. Why? Because the legionary is a professional soldier. He has got the best technology can provide in his era. So the main characteristic of a Roman legionary is the pristine conditions of his equipment, and he knows how to use the things he has. He uses them all day, every day, for years. He's a professional. But the main characteristic of a Viking are his advanced sailry and navigational skills. The equipment will depend a lot on whether we're talking about a free man, whether we're talking about a lord, for example, a jarl. Much will depend on that. So if you have just a free man, for example, he might not have armor. He might have a helmet. So let's consider this one has a helmet. He has raided it somewhere. He got it from someone who has died. So he's got a helmet and it fits him. Not perfectly, because it wasn't made for him. He just plundered it, but it still fits. It's okay. But the most common weapon would be a spear, together with a shield and possibly I have no idea how to pronounce this, seax, no idea, you tell me. let's consider spear and shield. As a matter of fact, a sword, some Vikings did have swords, but again, the rich ones would have swords, particularly when they were really well-made swords, like properly made swords. They would cost a lot, and they would be there to represent his status, okay? But yeah, spear and shield would be the most common combination that we would expect a Viking. What about a common legionary? Well, a common legionary is very well equipped. That's the thing. So we don't have to go all the way up to a legatus, or all the way up to a tribune, or whatever, like even a centurion. We don't need to go all the way up there to find a well-equipped soldier. All Roman legionaries were well-equipped, particularly if you're talking about late Republic and early Empire. So considering, as always, we always do, considering Lorica Hamata, so mail, okay, he's got riveted mail, he's got his scutum, he's got a pilum, and he also has a gladius as his main weapon. He wears a galea, a helmet on his head, and he's ready for combat. Of course, the first thing you could say is, well, couldn't the Roman just throw the pilum and kill his opponent, or perhaps break his shield? He could, of course, but on the other hand, some Vikings did use bows. So in order for this match to be even, let's remove the bow from the Norsemen. Not all had it anyways, and it wasn't used all the time. So let's consider that this one specifically doesn't have a bow. So let's consider that a Roman legionary, for whatever reason, doesn't have a pilum now. So they need to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Well, the Viking shield, although it's smaller than the Roman counterpart, it's a fantastic shield, and it's used in a very different way, and I think that would be key now. A Roman is used to fight a certain kind of opponent, and his opponents in that era, the classical era, the shields were all used in a very similar way. But the Viking shield is very interesting. The fact that he has this center grip, okay, allows you to do very specific techniques, like for example, if the Roman tries a stab and the Viking manages to intercept the stab, he can rotate the shield to sort of have the Roman lose balance and, stab him with his spear. So the Roman would have to adapt to a warrior who is using a kind of shield and spear combination that the Roman is not used to face. But on the other hand, of course, this means that it would depend on the skill of these fighters. A very experienced Roman knows how to be adaptable. That is the main characteristic of the Roman legions and the legionis and the Roman machina. The reason why it was so effective is because the Romans learned from their mistakes, and it was a very plastic. It had a sort of an element of plasticity to it, so that they could change depending on the enemy. So the Roman is trained to try and understand his opponent. So if the first time that he stabs and he sees that the opponent uses the shield in this very curious way from his point of view, he would, and if the opponent doesn't manage to stab him to death because of that, which again, the Roman is wearing full armor, so unless the Viking is incredibly precise like a surgeon and gets him in the throat, I would say that the Roman does stand a chance, even if he makes a mistake, that the armor or the helmet will provide the secondary line of defense, that they are there fulfilling their purpose of protection. Okay, so the scutum was bypassed because the Roman lost his balance, but the armor protects. It's a possible scenario. It's highly possible, and we are building our conjecture on probability. So after the first stab, basically not going well, the Roman knows that the opponent is using a very active defense against him, which is one of the characteristics of spear, Viking shield, or sword and Viking shield combat. Check out the channel from Ronald Verzeka if you want to learn more about sword and shield combat. He's really good, link in the description below. So in terms of combat, they're both very valid, but I would give again an advantage to the Roman because the normal Viking is not wearing armor, and even if he's wearing some form of padding, still the Roman gladius is really good at penetrating. So unless he's got metal armor, I think the Roman will win. The Viking is not a professional soldier, so at the end of the day, that's again another factor that plays here into the result, into the outcome of this duel, and I think it plays in favor of the Roman. The only case in which I can see the Viking having a chance against a Roman legionary of a similar level of skill is if it's a rich Viking who is also wearing mail, and possibly it's mail that was tailored for him and it's good quality. In that case, considering that the mail of the 8th century would already be a little longer than the mail used from the imperial times of Rome, and therefore would cover a bit more, I would imagine that an 8th century Viking or a 9th century Viking fully clothed in full armor, would be a formidable opponent also for a Roman. Still though, I would never give an advantage to the Viking, even in that situation. And yes, the spear gives him a range advantage, but the Romans knew how to deal with spears. So in a one-on-one situation, I myself, in my opinion, give an advantage to the Roman, and the only case in which I see the Roman losing is if the Norseman in question is of course a skilled Norseman, but he's also wealthy and fully armored. In that case, of course, the versatility of the combat, of the way the Norseman fights, the way he uses the shield, and the fact that his armor will protect him against the gladius, then puts them in an even situation, and I would say that yes, the Norseman could win against the Roman. But of course, as I always say, these videos are just my opinion, and I would like to hear yours. What do you think? Who would win if a Roman legionary and a Viking or a Norse seafarer and raider had to fight one against the other into a mortal combat, into a mortal duel? But please let me know in the comments below. Thank you, as always, for your support, and thank you for watching my content. I hope to see you again tomorrow for my next daily upload. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.